Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I am Jim LaBelle of the Biddeford and Saco Chamber of Commerce, and we are honored to be sponsoring this mayoral forum here tonight with the candidates for mayor of Biddeford. I'd like to thank Biddeford High School for the use of this beautiful little auditorium. Tonight, we have an opportunity to learn more about the candidates and their views on important local issues. Each of the candidates will be asked to answer questions, some of which were submitted in advance and some of which we were collecting as you came in this evening. So we'll try to match what we're asking with some of the questions that are submitted. Dina Mendrose, executive editor at Mainly Media, will serve as co-moderator with me. And now I'd like to thank the candidates for being here tonight and introduce them. We have Mayor Alan Casavant, and we have Mr. Jason L'Italian with us. So what we'd like to do is begin with opening remarks. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves and share why they believe they are the right choice to lead Biddeford forward in the coming election period. We will begin with Mayor Casavant.
Thank you. Good evening, and thanks for being here. 8 years ago, I was elected mayor of this city, and I pledged to revive our community and make it an enviable place in which to live, work, and play. With the help of superb staff and outstanding councils, I have delivered. Biddeford is not what it used to be before I took office. From the closure of Main Energy to the opening of Market Basket, from the development of thousands of feet of mill spaces to the renovation of Waterhouse Field, from the creation of Winterfest to the dredging of the Saco River, we have changed. We are now the youngest city in Maine, and we are regularly receiving accolades from the Boston Globe, local news, and from visitors to our area. We have deliberately and carefully planted an economic environment that has attracted award-winning restaurants and biotech firms. The new Biddeford is the envy of the state, and wherever I go, people stop me and ask about our new renaissance. This is not the time to change our course. This economic wave of innovation and investment with which we are blessed is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We must ride this wave if we are to succeed in stabilizing the tax rate and creating jobs. Unfortunately, change is not always easy. It incurs risk, and it can incur pain. We must do what must be done to continue our trajectory as a modern 21st century city. Maintaining the status quo is not an option, as it incurs the possibility of missing our moment. We must seek the maximization of our assets and build community. I have been doing that for my entire 8 years as your mayor. I have been your advocate and the city's biggest supporter. And if elected, I promise to deliver even more.
Thank you, Mayor Casavant, and now Mr. L'Italian.
Good evening. In 1933, FDR said in his inaugural address that America has a rendezvous with destiny. What is our destiny in Biddeford? Is it smarter development and lower taxes, better schools, elder care, and the people having a voice again? Or is it more of the same? Higher taxes, bad deals, and irresponsible spending of the last 8 years. I'm impressed by the hard work from our small businesses downtown, who, despite city officials trying to destroy the downtown momentum with parking meters, still have been able to ride out the storm in hopes that a change is coming. Someone that understands how hard it is to build a small business through experience will actually support their growth and not hamper it. I'm disappointed that it's become par for the course to ignore the people, from pushing to bring Merck into our downtown and then taking credit for removing it, to killing the racino we voted for, the superintendent residency, parking meters, and now wasting our money on an empty parking garage built on rainbows and unicorns. I see a proud city with hardworking people who just want our government to listen to us and respect our vote, but city officials who are happy to give kickbacks to the same developers while raising our taxes to cover the losses from these bad deals. Elderly who are struggling to pay these obscene taxes and still heat their homes and put food on their tables. And a school system that spends close to $40 million a year and is ranked the worst in English in York County and second to worst in science and math. We can make our city work for everyone. We can develop outside of downtown and reduce residential property taxes while still supporting our downtown small businesses. We can audit the school budget and figure out why our students don't have books, which is probably some reason why they're scoring so poorly on their tests. We can help our elderly residents stay in their homes until they're ready to leave, but most of all, we can ensure that the citizens are heard and respected and no longer ignored. My name is Jason L'Italian. I'm not running against anyone. I'm just running for you, to represent you, and to honor your voice. And I would appreciate your vote for mayor this year. Thank you.
Thank you both, gentlemen. I'd like to just share the format for the remainder of the evening now with you all. The candidate will be asked a question and have 2 minutes to respond to that question. And then the other candidate will then have 2 minutes to either rebut or also answer that same question. We will alternate who goes first on each question, and we will begin the first question with Mayor Casavant, and the first 2 questions will be from Dina Mendros.
So the first question is, what do you believe Biddeford's most important issue is right now, and how will you address it if you are elected?
It's a two-prong answer. The biggest pressure that we face right now is the rising property values that is destabilizing the tax rate. If you look at certain properties in the city of Biddeford, you begin to realize quite quickly that the assessed value and the selling values are totally different. So for example, on Main Street in the building to the right of City Hall, it was assessed at around $280,000 and it recently sold for over $800,000. You're seeing that up and down Main Street, which is one thing, but you're beginning to see that also in residential homes. The prices are beginning to climb dramatically. That's fine if you're selling your home, but if you're staying in your home, it guarantees higher taxes because, of course, the value of your home is based, the taxes are based on the value of your home. There's also an underbelly to that, too. And that underbelly is that many people are buying properties in Biddeford, renovating them because we have so many houses that are pre-1950, renovating them, putting in significant money, and then raising the rents. That is causing an issue of homelessness that we've never seen before, or it's been forcing people from out of our community. We have to find a better way in which we can stabilize the housing market, but again, being a local municipality, that's difficult. But we also have to find a way to deal with the inequality in incomes and try to find a way to better manage the way housing is offered in the city of Biddeford.
Mr. L'Italian, your chance.
I think that taxes are definitely our biggest issue. Our tax rate has gone up 30% since the mayor took office, and your tax burden, which is the amount you actually pay for your taxes based on the assessed value, as well as the tax rate, has gone up 40%. How much longer is that sustainable? It isn't. But along with taxes, we don't have a revenue problem in Biddeford, we have a spending problem. I mentioned briefly about our school budget being $40 million, close to that. We're spending over $2,000 more per student than the state average, yet our schools are in the bottom third of the state. How is that possible? How is it my nephew has classrooms that don't have textbooks? How is that even possible? And yet we continue to go down and down and down, and I know that the mayor has mentioned textbooks before about having digital textbooks, except they don't have digital textbooks either. And the teachers are making photocopies, and they're handing out photocopies, which is expensive. Our taxes are not going to go down until we use smarter development. And instead of feeding and feeding and feeding the developers all of our tax money, we need to let them come in and either stand or fall on their own. And if they stand on their own, then they make our city better because they bring in more tax revenue for us. We need to audit the school budget and figure out where the book money is going. But most importantly, we need to listen to the people again. How many times do we have to say the same thing and then just be ignored? And I think that must be the biggest problem that I have with what's going on, is that we're not being listened to. And if we were listened to, I think our taxes would be a lot more bearable at this point. Thank you.
As of today, Biddeford has free temporary parking on Main Street and paid parking in municipal lots, along with plans for a parking garage. If you're elected, what changes, if any, will you see going forward related to downtown parking?
Everybody knows my feeling on parking. I mean, we voted overwhelmingly 6,761 to 959 to have no meters, but we have meters today, and it's killed downtown. Stacy from Biscuits and Company stood right here on June 26th and told us how her business is down 18.5% since the meters went in. Plus, she has to pay $1,500 more per year now to pay for parking. If you've ever owned a business, you understand the 30% markup, which means she has to do $4,500 extra in sales to get to the same point she was at before she lost the 18%. So if I took 18.5% of your salary today, could you afford to live in Biddeford anymore? The parking meters were voted against for a reason. The point was that we didn't want them here. We were told falsities regarding them. We were even told that they were never discussed being in the parking lots. That was also said on June 29th. The mayor was interviewed and he said, we never discussed it, yet I held up a DVD 90 minutes earlier with him on it discussing exactly that, using parking meters in the lots, using 1 meter as a kiosk for an entire lot. Now we're going to give all these parking meters and all the surface lots we just spent $150,000 resurfacing to the developers of the garage. That's part of the garage deal. The garage deal is so bad for us. It's a 10-year deal. We're going to give them $8.6 million over the first 10 years, plus all of the revenue off of all the surface lots that we just spent our money on, plus all the revenue out of the garage. And then at year 10, we get to purchase for fair market value. And I was just recently told by a business owner that I expect that to be $40 million at year 10. That's actually what the deal is for us. Oh, and the best part is, too, if they want to raise their rates, the city council gets to use tax money to buy down the rate to subsidize parking for the mills, even though we've been told that you can't subsidize parking on the other side of Main Street for George's and Louis and everybody else.
There's no such thing as free parking. Somebody ends up paying no matter what, whether it comes out of your tax bill or it comes out of meters or whatever it happens to be. Currently, if you look at all of downtown, there is 90% free parking in all the lots and streets. 90%, actually probably a little bit more than that. The myth that exists that you have to pay for parking is simply that, it's a myth. We could talk about taxes and how much money is going out. But one of the things that's interesting to me, of course, is that $216 of every $200,000 that you have in your tax bill came from the renovation of the high school, which you voted on. I mean, it's ascribed to me, but looking at the tax rate is a little bit more difficult once you look at the nuances contained within it. When you look at the garage, you got to understand a couple of basic things with the garage. If you don't have the garage, you don't have development. If you don't have development, you don't have that extra income that you need to stabilize your taxes. We've already had businesses that have tried to come into Biddeford and they could not do so simply because there was no parking for them. Currently, we have the Lincoln Mill on board. We have the Riverdam Mill that's going through its project. We have a developer that's willing to build 2 different towers on either side of the parking garage. We're working with the Saco Lowell owner. All those places need parking. This is exactly like the city did back in the 1960s when the mills left, and they wanted to do something to attract business, and what do? They spent money up front on industrial parks, lights, sewers, whatever it happened to be. Garages are infrastructure. That's what they are. That's what they're supposed to be. Cities build infrastructure. And so for me, from my standpoint, when you look at the parking plan with all the free parking that we have, when you look at the parking garage and look at your particular desire to stabilize taxes, there's only one way to do that. Well, actually 2 ways. You can eliminate services, but people don't like to eliminate services unless it's something that they don't want to use. But the only other option is to somehow come up with a way to increase your revenue stream. Conservative estimates say that if you build a garage, the first 10 years, we get $10 million of new tax money. At the end of the bond, $39 million. It's a business model. Sometimes you got to spend money to make money. Yeah, it's a risk, but doing nothing is an even bigger risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. And keeping in that vein, next question to start with you. From an economic development standpoint, do you believe the city should continue to play such an active role in helping to develop the downtown area and Mill District especially?
Yeah, we have to. We don't even know where the rest of the city is. So for example, the Economic Improvement and Planning Office does considerable work with the businesses in the industrial park, which are really rather interesting. For example, whether it's FMI or Vogue Packaging, you have some cutting-edge technologies that are being at work there. However, the thing that people have to understand, I got to backtrack a little bit here, is that, again, when you're stabilizing taxes, you got to look at the biggest bang for the buck. There is no place in the city of Biddeford, except in the Mill District in the downtown, that can generate the new revenue that we need in order to stabilize taxes. Plus, it has the luxury of having sewer and water and everything else that you absolutely need. Some people say, well, geez, you're spending an awful lot of time in the downtown. Well, maybe our focus might be there, but that doesn't mean we're ignoring every place else. It's just like I said, the most important aspect in terms of development is the best available of space, and from a city perspective, how to generate new income. I mean, my vision of the downtown blends with the Mill District. I look at it as one. And, you know, the excitement that's being generated throughout the city, I have so many people that tell me, Alan, I love the downtown. Alan, I love the mill architecture. I love the different vibrancy within the mills and so forth. It makes Biddeford unique, and I think that's important from an economic development standpoint so that we can at least nurture that. You know, we're not going to get the big boxes anymore, the big things, the big businesses that have 500 employees or 600 employees. Those days are long gone. You got to nurture entrepreneurs and local development and the arts and things like that in order to create a place of which you can be proud and sustain yourself.
The current path is not sustainable for long term. It looks nice for a few years, but we cannot continue to subsidize developers with our tax money and hope that they're going to succeed. The citizens cannot continue to fund these businesses with our taxes. We should support local businesses by improving in a way that develops and benefits to all of us, not just the mills. We can make a gateway into Biddeford, and this is one of the things that I've waited until tonight to discuss. The long mill building that goes right along Main Street, we're going to tear that down. We're going to get it donated. We're going to tear it down. We're going to create a gateway into the city, and that gateway is going to have trees down the middle. We're going to have a traffic circle at the bottom. And then there's going to be parking along the side, which is going to open up more to the mills, create more light in the mills, and it's also going to create more money for the mills without requiring us to build a parking garage. The brick that we use when we demolish will be used over at the Merck site. It opens up Main Street more. It creates more natural light. It allows for more private development. And once we've opened up this area, then the developers can go in on their own and start making it work. The current plan, which is really well shown by the Riverdam Mill, is a 20-year, 100% kickback. So for 20 years, Riverdam Mill gets 100% back of what they give to the city over and above what they already do. So right now, they pay $20,000 a year. For the next 20 years, any additional tax revenue as their value goes up, goes right back to them. There's no benefit to the city general taxes. It creates an additional burden on our emergency services, on public works. We also bought their building for $10 a couple of months ago so we could take the asbestos and lead paint out for them, and then we're going to sell the building back to them probably for 50 cents because that's the way our deals tend to work. Currently, we get the $20,000 a year, and so that over 20 years would be $400,000 in tax revenue. But it actually ends up being a $300,000 loss when you look at the credit enhancement and how much we're giving them back. This is a horrible deal that we're stuck with, and we need to stop doing this, but we can at least look at it and learn from it and find better ways to make our city move forward without the citizens having to fund every single idea. Thank you.
Okay, staying with you, Mr. L'Italien. In recent years, the tax rate and average home valuations have been going up, as noted earlier. If elected, where do you see tax rates going, and how do you anticipate that movement happening?
Well, we discussed a little bit earlier. We have a spending problem, not a revenue problem in Biddeford. Somebody needs to go in and look at it, and I've got lots of experience with businesses going in and helping them become profitable when they weren't. We need to look at our school budget. We need to figure out, why is it so high? Why are we spending so much per student? And why are we getting such poor results out of it? We also need to look at our home values and say, if our home values are so much and we're such a great city that everybody wants to move to it, why does the mill rate continue to climb? It's not sustainable. You cannot climb forever. Eventually it'll be 100% taxes and so on and so forth. There's one lady that spoke to me where her grandmother is paying $1,000 more per year now for her property taxes than they paid for their home. It's simply not sustainable. When will that actually end? We have to get in there, and we're going to have to squeeze the buckle, and we have to look at things that we don't need. Some things look really nice and really pretty, but we don't need them. And we need to look at this and say, how do we actually rein in spending and still make our city move forward? Thank you.
In order to stabilize taxes, there's a number of things that you have to do. But one of them, I just got to go back to the other question when my opponent was talking about what's called TIFLAR and the idea of subsidizing developers. That's not exactly true. TIFLAR is rather complicated, but what it essentially means is that you protect your assets. Remember, in terms of taxation, every single dollar is controlled by the state. They set the rules. You can say, for example, we got to give money back to our elderly. You can't do that. You got to go follow state law. It doesn't work that way. And TIFLAR is especially important because if you don't have properties that are TIF, out of every new dollar of taxation that you get, you lose 50 cents of it. But if you TIF it, you keep a buck. It's sort of like if you have an IRA and the money is taken out of your paycheck before taxes. You benefit from that. TIFLAR is exactly the same thing. So doing TIFs is not a bad thing. It's actually a rather important thing for you to do. To say that the city's overspending is, again, it's totally wrong. If you look at City Hall staff, for example, you're going to find that it's understaffed. If somebody's sick, nothing gets done because there's no replacements. Nothing. If you start looking at contracts are 70% of the budget if you look at benefits. We tried, or I've tried a number of times, for example, to make things more streamlined, and we are. We work with the city of Saco now more than we ever have. We've combined departments, we combined salaries. There's no overspending in City Hall. What's driving the budget is inflation, like you know at home with your oil and your groceries and things like that. That's a driver. Contracts are a driver. The inability of the state to fund the city with revenue sharing, if you look at the rise of the mill rate over the last 7 or 8 years, it's directly proportional to what the city is owed by the state of Maine for back taxes. $13 million we did not get from the state of Maine. They failed to do that even though by law they're supposed to do that. Sort of the same with education, right? 55%, they don't do that either. So what ends up happening is your tax dollars, my tax dollars, which went up $500 last year, for example, is being penalized because of the state refusing to do what it's supposed to do. So again, the offset is, well, if the state doesn't give you what it's supposed to, if you don't want to cut services, how do you stabilize the tax rate? You got to find new income. Guess what? Brings us right back to the parking garage and the mills, because that's the only way, and I'll repeat that, it's the only way you can get new money to do anything. Thank you.
Apartment rental costs have increased here in recent years as more and more people choose to live in Biddeford, and as people have renovated and now charge higher rates, rental rates. How can the city help residents that are struggling with affordable housing?
The city has allowed a number of projects with affordable housing. The Nathan Zanton buildings, for example, have what's called workforce housing. And that's been an important remedy for the situation. I know that individuals say that one of the options is to sell city land and develop those particular areas because it would guarantee that it could be built for free and that a revenue would come back to the city. It's not true. We don't have enough land. If you actually look at the land that the city possesses now, most of it has certain types of restrictions because of watersheds or whatever it happens to be. We did an inventory of land about 1 or 2 years ago and tried to sell most of it. But in terms of actual having land that's buildable for development of affordable housing, it doesn't really exist. And the other thing that happens too is that if you look at the Biddeford housing budget, it's so close to breaking even that there is absolutely no way that it could ever give money back to the city. On the other hand, we've got some other issues. There are bigger issues in terms of affordable housing. I was speaking at the high school today, and a couple of students talked to me about how their families are trying to find apartments in the city of Biddeford and how difficult it is. We know that. I mean, that's one of the problems that we're facing, where people are buying buildings and jacking up the rents after they fix them up. So it's a double-edged sword. In other words, you get all these buildings that are substandard and need repair, people are investing in them and then try to recoup that investment. That's a good thing. The bad thing is the rental issue. We have to work a lot better with made state housing is the way most of this stuff is done, try to get access to capital. There's probably very few ways in which the city of Biddeford could actually generate a pool of money by itself, because if it did that, because the pie is so small, other things would suffer. The city just does not have enough money to do it by itself. So it's a partnership between the state, Biddeford Housing, and the city of Biddeford in order to get things done.
Since you did a callback, I get to go callback as well, I guess. So here's the actual TIF that we were discussing. Please see the tab says kickback. That's talking about the 100% right there. It's not the TIF, it's the credit enhancement that I was discussing. The gentrification of downtown is hurting our families and it's putting them onto the streets. I had one lady who was living with her 10-year-old son almost across the street from me in Shamrock Campground up until September 30th in a tent, and that's where he was going to school from. And there were families there as well. They're being kicked out of their homes. Part of it is the city's allowing all this redevelopment to go on downtown, and they're not making the developers be responsible for the parking which the ordinance requires. And so people are coming in and they have all this extra money to develop, and what they're doing is they're pushing people out onto the streets, and the city's not taking care of our people. That has to be our first priority. And to say there's only one way to do anything is tunnel vision. That's never true. There's always other ways to do things. And Biddeford Housing Authority is willing to work with us and help create affordable housing. There is land that we can sell. Matter of fact, there's a whole 8.5 parcel acre of land over by where Merck used to be that we could actually sell. And if we do put the housing in, we get 2% back out of their revenue. Right now, on any city-owned land, we get zero tax revenue because we own it. Instead, if we can put that land to work for us and provide affordable housing for people, that's a win-win situation. You don't get any better deal than that where both sides come out ahead. Thank you.
A related question, and one you've spoken to about just now, despite economic growth and how unemployment rates are getting lower, and we have economic growth going higher, we continue to have issues with homelessness in Biddeford. How can the city address the problem of homelessness in ways that you mentioned and other ways?
Well, the biggest thing is working with the Biddeford Housing Authority and the state and figuring out what we need to do. We're causing this problem to ourselves, and then the city's taxing us to fix the problem that they're causing. And it's not fair to the citizens that are here, and it's pushing other citizens out of the city. And that's based on the increase in taxes that we continue to see. We have people that are living on the street right now, 54 children, I believe is the last number. We should not have children sleeping on the street in Biddeford at night. And that's because the city is ignoring it. The city is ignoring the problem. The city is not looking at what their effect is. And part of the thing with the TIF is that you also have to go through and you have to look at how the TIF actually affects people in displacing them. And the city said, there is no displacement? Oh, no, it said not applicable. It is applicable because people are being kicked out of their homes right now because of what's going on in the TIF district. We need to look at better ways to take care of our people and protect them from these taxes. And we're not going to do that by building imaginary garages that are just going to hopefully bring something. There are no towers coming yet. Nothing has committed to building that. All we've committed to is building an empty parking garage and hoping that something else will come afterward. And if we want to fix affordable housing, then we have to look at the root of the problem, which is the development and the lack of affordable housing brought in afterward. If a developer is going to come in and displace 10 families, then there should be 10 affordable units created for that. That's the only way to make this work for everybody.
It's wrong to say that there are 50 kids or 50 kids living on the streets. There's homelessness, but that includes by definition couch surfing and staying with relatives. That's the way the state rule actually merits that. That's not to say that that's not an issue. I mean, there was a family, for example, about a year ago living in front of MacArthur Library, a woman who was working with her 2 kids, and she was trying to find an apartment in a building in Biddeford, and she could not do so. So there is an issue that we're facing with that. It's not also correct to say that the city's not doing anything. The city manager met with Main State Housing maybe about, I don't know, a month or so ago to talk about the issues facing Biddeford and the idea of rising property values. We've also talked with the council in terms of creating a pool of money in conjunction with Main State Housing, so that it would be enticing to a developer to but stabilize the rents for a period, we'll say 10 years, if they get X amount of dollars at low interest or in a grant form. But again, the city of Biddeford does not have that money by itself, because you got to remember that you'd have to raise taxes in order to do that. But you have to work with Main State Housing. It's also disingenuous to say that Biddeford's taxes are taxing people out of their homes. That's not exactly true either. You know, for example, in terms of the elderly, the city has not taken a house in over 10, 15 years or something like that. We don't do it. We work out systems of payment. If you look at other particular communities, you also see the same type of arguments that taxes are too high. It's not just here. It's the rising rates of what's happening in supply and demand economics. And there's no way to stop that rush. You can mourn and talk about how, you know, when I bought my house, for example, I paid $38,000 for it. My tax bill was $1,400, roughly. You know, today it's assessed, I don't know, somewhere around $300,000. I pay over $5,000 in taxes. Proportionally, it's about the same. But of course, being on a fixed income, that hurts. And I understand that. But it's not, again, we're not talking overspending. We're not talking about high taxation. But what's driving the economy and the tax bills now is the valuation. Because for the last few years, because of the circuit breaker, people's tax bills have actually been going down. But if you notice, because the circuit breaker actually dropped this year, because the city's evaluation process is so off, because as I said a little bit earlier, houses are selling much more highly than their assessed value, which means there has to be a revaluation somewhere along the line quite quickly to balance things out. And of course, that's going to create more heartache, because whenever you have a reval, you have people who win and people who lose in terms of their net gain or net loss in terms of the tax bill.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about public education. Our school system has seen improved scores, but in the last few years, the school department has been sustained on an average annual budget increase of only 1%. Can we expect them to continue to improve with that difficult funding scenario going forward, given the limits on taxation?
I taught for 35 years. The school that you folks all went to is not the schools of today. And the superintendent was quite clear about that, you know, a week or so ago. There are approximately 40 different languages spoken in the Biddeford School Department today. 40 different languages. Not only that, you have a high degree of a transient population. If you look at the number of students who start in kindergarten, only 50% of those are still in school their senior year. They're on the move all the time. If you look at the free reduced lunch numbers, Biddeford is higher than anybody around us. You can't look at scores. I mean, I taught. I've got kids that are all over the world doing wonderful things. The public school system is doing an extraordinary good job. However, there are some issues that have nothing to do with the amount of money spent, have nothing to do with the teachers. It's all socioeconomics. And Biddeford by itself is not going to change that. The poverty level is part of it. The displaced housing is going to be part of it. The family breakup is going to be part of it. I remember in the 90s or so when all of a sudden we were supposed to talk to parents and if a student was in trouble. And I remember calling up a parent. His kid had probably an average of about a 5. No kidding. I mean, it was that low. And I called the parent, and the parent said over the, you know, using a lot of foreign words, you know, what am I supposed to do about it? And I realized at that point, there's no way that this kid's ever going to succeed because he doesn't have the background. If you look at the highest scoring schools, where do you see them? Cape Elizabeth, Falmouth. Why? Because the parents are involved and because they have a lot of money. Scores mean nothing. It's sort of like every now and then on Facebook. Oh my God, Biddeford's got the highest crime rate in the state of Maine. Come on, it's not true. It's because when you do statistics, you can pick and choose what numbers you want, and that's the same with education. It doesn't mean a thing. Thank you.
I have a doctorate in law, and I really wish at law school they didn't look at schools. look at scores, I mean. I probably would have graduated first in my class if they hadn't looked at scores. We're not the only school system who's facing these challenges, so why would it be any different for us? Why would scores not matter in Biddeford if they matter all across the rest of the state? Are we the only school system who has students that are coming and going? Are we the only school system who has students that speak more than one language? We're not. And we're paying $2,200 more per student than the state average. We pay $1,500 more per student than Saco, right next door. We don't even have to go any further than across the bridge to compare. We have 2,456 students in our schools this year, far lower than what we used to have. It's gone up a little bit, but we do have fewer students. But our budget continues to climb. It's $5 million more this year than it was when he took office. Why don't we audit the school budget and figure out what is actually going on? Where is this money going, and why is it so much more expensive to educate a student in Biddeford than it is to educate a student anywhere else? Why don't we look at other school districts so we can understand why they are performing better? And why are they spending less per student but still getting better results? We need to talk with teachers. I've sat down and spoken with teachers, with students, and what we hear from the superintendent and what we hear from the city is very different than what the people actually working in the classroom will tell you. And I just think that if we want to make our schools better, then we must look at the entire picture. We cannot just sit here and look at one little bit. But on the same token, we cannot discredit the fact that our numbers are so bad. Because you and I all know that if we were in the top of the school, it would single-handedly be because of the person sitting next to me. Thank you.
The next question concerns workforce and workforce development. Some people call this a good problem to have, but local companies right now have hundreds of openings that they need to fill to keep growing. What can the city do to help these companies find more employees?
One thing we need to do is leverage our Center of Technology. Right next door, we have this incredible building, and we have a big lull in our country right now and in our city for plumbers, for electricians, and for other tradespeople. We need to get people through that school, and we need to bring in more programs where we take local plumbers and local electricians, and we get them to work with our students. So when our students graduate, they can start going straight to work. They can start backfilling these jobs. Because if we're all doctors and lawyers, we still need somebody to fix our pipes. And so we need to leverage that Center of Technology. We need to get the local community more involved with our high school. So that as students are graduating, not everybody wants to go to college. I didn't want to go to college when I graduated from high school. I chose to go to the military instead. Not everybody wants to do that either. But if somebody doesn't want to go to college, then we need to use our local resources and get them employed right from the beginning so that when they graduate, they can start contributing back to our society.
Over the last couple of years, the CO2 has actually expanded its programming and the number of students within the program. So for example, plumbing and heating has been added, EMS training has been added, medical management has been added, and we're working on a culinary program. So we've already begun to look and expand what happens in that particular building. And we've actually renovated the building too, because if you recall, it hadn't been touched until, well, since 1970 or so. The other thing we've been exploring is the use of immigrants. I was actually contacted by an individual who lives in Biddeford but works in Portland, and he tries to teach English words for individuals from foreign countries, but not just the typical English way of doing it. He teaches the words in the workplace. So in other words, if they work at a particular machine, they would know the vocabulary for that particular machine. I mean, it's quite clear that we have an aging workforce and that we need help. I know whether it's Arundel Machinery or whatever it happens to be, there are people who are looking for workers. And if we can get them locally, then it's really to our benefit to also look at getting some of the newer immigrants who are college graduates, but just have barriers with their language. The city's also been working with the Chamber of Commerce and trying to create programs to link workers with employers. And in the Planning and Development Office of the City of Biddeford, we also have a program in terms of workforce development and trying to keep workers in their place and finding if there are issues developing in a workplace to find out earlier enough so that we can correct them so that the employees can be retained.
In Biddeford, the mayor, the city administrator, and the city council all perform different roles. What do you think is the main role of the mayor of Biddeford, and how do you plan to work with the city council and administration to enact your agenda?
I'm not quite sure I heard everything on that, but I think I got the general skill. Because of charter changes over the last, I don't know, ever since Papa Losier, right? Papa Losier was 18 years as mayor, and he was the last of the boss mayors. Since that point in time, the power of the mayor has really been eroded. I mean, the last charter change, for example, took away more powers from the mayor. In fact, one of the ones I was talking about someone today, the mayor cannot even run for the state legislature anymore. But saying all that, I mean, the mayor's position is very narrow. John McCurry, who is the council president, whenever we get in a discussion about one policy or another, he always goes 5. In other words, what dictates policy is 5 members of the council. Even in terms of the veto power, I don't even have much veto power. That's been stripped away too. It's only in terms of bills that cost money, I can't veto policy. I can't veto anything like that. So it's really narrow. So what do? When I first became mayor, a department head took me aside and said, if you can do anything for the city of Biddeford, it's to act professional and be the face of the city. And that's what I do. I advocate when I have to. I cajole when I have to. If you talk to the councils, you'll find I don't twist arms. I'm caricatured as a puppet who controls everybody in the council. I think if you ask anybody out here, I don't do that. Because I trust them. I built up a superb relationship with the 4 councils that I've served with. I respect their judgment. Sometimes we don't agree because some are more conservative than I might be, or some might be more liberal. But one thing we established, which is really remarkable in today's day and age, is that we can disagree on the council floor, and afterwards, we get along. If you come to a council meeting, you'll find nobody yelling at each other. Audience yells at us, but the council members do not yell at each other because we have an element of decorum and professionalism that we try to embody. That's my job, to accentuate that. The city manager runs the day-to-day operations. He's in charge of all the different employees. He's gone. He's at a seminar this week. Am I in charge? No, because I don't have that authority. It's been taken away by city charters. So it's a balancing act, I guess is what I'm saying, between the council, the city manager, and myself. But the whole idea is to maintain the right energy and the perception, the integrity and the professionalism and stability. Because if you want development, if you want people to come here, to move here, to invest here, you've got to project an image where people act decently. Thank you.
Well, I obviously don't have any experience being mayor. Everybody has to run the first time, I guess. But what I believe the mayor is the person who represents the people. The mayor has influence more than anything. Sure, the mayor's hands are tied in a lot of things, but the veto for spending bills is a huge power that the mayor has. When 90% of your citizens tell you don't do something and the council approves the purchase of parking meters anyways, the mayor could veto it. It was a 5-4 decision to buy those parking meters last year. It takes a 6-3 vote by the council to overturn a mayor's veto. So if everybody had voted the same way, the mayor could have single-handedly stopped the parking meters from going through last year. That, to me, is a huge power that the mayor has. The mayor also appointed 4 members of the current council serving with him, so it's easy to get along with people when you're the reason why they're sitting there. I think that there's a whole lot of things that the mayor could do that he's not doing, and part of that, the biggest part, is the influence. It's easy to go in and influence people to do what you want when you put them there in office. And I can't sit here and talk about all the things the mayor does because I don't know yet. But I do know the most important thing is the very first thing in the charter, and that's the mayor is supposed to uphold the laws and ordinances of the city and the state.
Municipal budgets are always constrained, but if you had the opportunity to invest more in one specific department which department do you believe is in most need of additional funding resources?
That's an easy question. The fire department. The fire department hasn't had a contract in 18 months. That's embarrassing. These people go out and save our lives every day. Do you realize that we get something called mutual aid? So what that means is that if we need help, SACA will send someone over to help us. If they need help, we're supposed to send it back. Mutual aid. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen because we don't have the right funding for our fire department. So Goodwin's Mills, Saco, Scarborough, Old Orchard Beach, Arundel, and there may be another one or two in there, are actually paying for a lot of our fire budget because they're sending people here to help us. I wonder how those taxpayers would feel if they knew that part of their taxes is taking care of Biddeford's funding. Also, the fire department needs a boat. It's a $35,000 Zodiac. We just spent $20,000 reconfiguring the green lot after all of the money that we spent on all the signs, changing them every other day, yet we couldn't get $35,000 for the fire department to get a boat to go in the ocean and save lives. We're lucky enough to live somewhere where we have a river on one side and an ocean in front of us. But we shouldn't have to call Saco to come over and rescue our people every time somebody needs help down at the beach. We also should not be calling Scarborough, because when Saco's not available, Scarborough has to bring a boat here, and it takes 20 minutes for them to get up the coast. I think it takes, what, just a couple of minutes for brain damage to set in if you can't breathe? We're not doing a service to our visitors or to our people who live here by not funding our fire department properly. And that's the first thing I would say we need to look at for funding.
Last time there was a vote to increase the number of firemen, I broke the tie in the affirmative. Yeah, in my view, they need more men, but the council's been split on that. That's just one of the things that happens. So yeah, I think the fire department is probably, because of the number of calls they have per year, they need more additional employment. There's no doubt about that. And I think the Economic Improvement Office also needs some help. We've been one engineer short with all the development taking place. They can't keep up. If you recall, I said a little bit earlier, the city hall is understaffed. It's true. We have those particular issues. I defer a little bit on the mutual aid package. I wouldn't say that it's never happens. When my mother had her stroke when she was in Saco, it was the Biddeford Fire Department that showed up because Saco had other calls. And I have to say that when they showed up, they did a superb job in terms of care. The boat's a complicated issue. There was some conversation a few years ago with jointly purchasing a fireboat with Saco, and that fell by the wayside. A lot of reasons for that, no use getting into it here, but it's one of those things that would make much more sense to do together in collaboration. For each city to have a fireboat makes absolutely no sense to me. The boat that Saco bought, I think, and I'm kind of going back in memory here, was like $90,000. Fortunately, we have a member of the Paul Riviere, who's on the Coastal Commission, and he has his own boat service, and he gives us a lot of advice in terms of buying and selling of boats and things of that nature. So I respect his expertise, and at that juncture it was like, this probably might not be the right thing to do, but he keeps looking for us, so maybe somewhere in the future that might happen. But to me, it just makes more sense to collaborate. Why be redundant and have multiple pieces of equipment? It reminds me of a story quite a few years ago. My God, it goes back to the 1990s, I think. We started talking with Saco about collaboration, and the big discussion was over a sewer camera. Yeah, a sewer camera, because Biddeford had one, Saco didn't. And we talked about it, and it never got passed. And because the logjam was, well, if they need it at the same time that we need it, who's going to get it? And that's where everything came to a stop. So you may think collaboration is pretty easy to do. It's not, because of local parochial beliefs. Fortunately, I've been able to work with the mayor of Saco, Marston Lovell, on a regular basis. We meet once a month talking about collaborations like that. He's been excellent in trying to move things forward, and I hope that we can continue that conversation.
Staying with you, Mr. Mayor, here is a question submitted this evening by a resident. What is Biddeford doing with regard to climate change, and what could it be doing better?
Basically, some of the things we've done is, Jack, basically in terms of lighting. We've changed all the lightings within the schools to the newer light bulbs. We've done some work up at the Public Works Garage. We've been talking about other forms of power in terms of powering the water treatment plant and things of that nature, because that's one of the bigger uses of electricity. But those are pretty much the biggies for me that we've done. We're struggling again with technology in some ways. We've talked about solar. In fact, there's been some conversation about some solar energy farming and stuff like that, but it's in the infancy stage.
Not really sure how I'm supposed to answer that one, because it's what has the city already done. So, I mean, the mayor covered the LED lights, also the plastic bags. The city banned the plastic bags. I'd like to see something with the Biddeford Saco Courier bags too, because those are still 22,000 bags every week that are winding up either in the recycling or not. One item that somebody had brought to my attention was possibly using stormwater for hydropower. You can actually put generators underground now with the stormwater that would actually create electricity for us, and we could use that in the Mill District, or we could use that in other areas of the city to create more electricity. That's really all I can think of right now.
Okay, thank you. The final question we prepared is related to state government. With Governor Mills taking over this year, a lot has changed in Augusta, a lot of new legislation and activity in the last year. How do you feel about the changes at the state level that have been happening in the last year?
Honestly, the state level doesn't affect me as much as I think that it may affect other people. I'm more concerned with what's going on here. I'm more concerned with my taxes. I'm more concerned with, you know, going downtown and being able to hang out with my friends and not have to worry about racing back and filling in the parking meter. I think that there's some things that have been great happen at the state level. You know, I think that we have a citizen's veto that's going to be coming up because some people disagree with it. I think that the mayor needs to work with what's going on at the state level, but at this point, I'm not really certain that there's much that has to do with our local election that really matters what's going on at the state.
Okay. From my point of view, it's been a positive. We managed to get more revenue sharing money this year, not as much as we were promised, but we got more, and I think that's a huge step in the right direction with the promise that eventually we'll be back to where we're supposed to be. We got more aid to education for our schools. We got more money for the COT. And there's more of a working dialogue between the governor's office and the city of Biddeford, and of course we have great dialogue with our local representatives. So overall, in terms of what I saw with Augusta, it was much better. I thought the previous administration was just a roadblock, and yeah, maybe some people saved money in terms of their state taxes, but boy, it fell on the backs of the local government over and over and over again, and that's not the way it should be, because if you look at property taxes, that's probably the least fair of all the taxes that occurs in the state of Maine. But remember, again, all tax policy is controlled by the state. The city of Biddeford cannot waver from that one iota. And that becomes problematic. You know, so for example, one of the things that almost came out of the legislature was a local property tax, not a property tax, sales tax. I thought there was some pros and cons to that. You know, I know Portland would benefit enormously, but it was something to consider as a tool maybe to offset property taxes, especially maybe during the summer months when there are tourists here and so on and so forth. That got shot down by the legislature inevitably. But those are the types of things we need. The other thing, the last point, you know, when we start talking economic development, I had a developer tell me, Alan, do you understand that Maine has so few tools in its toolbox in order to attract businesses? This conversation took place when the Brunswick Naval Air Station was trying to attract some sort of company there, and it got sidetracked and went to Michigan because Michigan could offer so much more. Our tax code is so outdated But the problem is the legislature doesn't want to change it because you have so many competing elements in the legislature, whether from northern Maine, coastal Maine, southern Maine, interior Maine, all competing in terms of their points of view, and the result is always stalemate.
I know a couple of years ago, Biddeford and Saco worked together to hire someone to help with the opioid crisis in the area,
Yep.
I'm wondering if you think that there is anything more that the city can do to work on that issue.
That's me, right? Yeah, a couple years ago, we secured a grant from the state of Maine to hire an individual to deal with the opioid crisis. State cut it next year, even though it was hugely successful. So the cities of Biddeford and Saco jointly pay for her particular salary. It's been hugely successful. She has put a number of individuals into treatment. You know, whenever someone's arrested or has an overdose, whatever happens to be, she reaches out and offers to get them into some sort of treatment facility. And it's worked. It's been a model for other cities to emulate. The other things that we've been doing, and of course everybody does, is in terms of education, community awareness, things of that nature. The police department has been extremely close in monitoring the situation, going into areas where individuals stay and, you know, mostly in the parks, and talk to individuals about their illnesses and things of that nature. So we're desperately doing some sort of things. It's one of those issues that there's no silver bullet in order of eliminating the issue, but man, the woman that we hired is just doing an exceptional job.
The opioid crisis is a cancer on our country and on our community. Locally, we have to ensure that the police have all the necessary tools that they can. That includes protecting them as well as the citizen. I'd like to work with the Scarborough Police Department. They have a program called Operation Hope, and if anybody has had an opportunity to look into Operation Hope, it's a really fantastic program that works with people. It's not just about arresting people that are using illegal drugs and just putting them in jail. It's about working with people and helping them recover, and helping them move forward in their lives and become progressive, positive members of their community once again. And I think that locally, that's probably one of the biggest things that we could do, is work with Scarborough and find out how we can bring that program into Biddeford and help our people that need the help.
Thank you. As I came in this evening, a number of people felt it was important to remind me when the Patriots game starts this evening. So very much appreciate both of you answering our questions tonight. We would like to provide an opportunity for a closing statement. And Mr. L'Italian, if you'd like to go first.
Before you vote this year, you have to ask yourself a few questions. If things keep going the way they are, can I afford to stay in Biddeford? Can I afford another 40% increase on my taxes? Can we afford to allow students to continue to fall behind the rest of the state? Should the elites and special interests get special tax breaks while the rest of us pay the difference? If you're happy with our underperforming schools, annual tax increases, and a mayor who flat out ignores your voice, then you should vote for Mr. Cassavant. He has proven that he will raise taxes to support his friends in the mills while giving them kickbacks so only you and I pay more. Instead, if you want somebody who has small business experience, who's built them from the ground up, who understands how to get what we need and still lower costs, who'll put people first and honor your vote, and who will also take care of the elderly and encourage smart development, not just provide kickbacks, then you should vote for me. While Mr. Cassavant leads the way to higher taxes, corporate welfare, and badly performing schools, I will work to lower our taxes and find developers who want to be a part of the community, not just suck from it. I'll work to bring in large employers, to create good jobs and reduce our residential taxes. We owe it to our kids to give them the best foot forward, and they need to be able to study so they can come home and then make our city better. I'm a proven leader. I've led troops around the world. I don't need to take credit for others' successes because I've made my own successes. I don't blame others for my failures. A leader gives credit to those around them and then takes blame for failures. People who don't understand the basics of leadership should not use that word loosely or claim to be a leader when they clearly are not. I've spent most of my life fighting for you. I served our country honorably, and I fought for your constitutional rights last year when Alan chose to willingly violate them. I want to make the city better for everyone, not just the elites and the special interests. A vote for me on November 5th is a vote for an affordable future where the people who built our community can afford to live in it and enjoy it. I've proven I listen to the people. I've proven that the citizens will always come first. And I've proven that my heart is for Biddeford. Thank you, and have a good night.
I want to thank you all for being here tonight. This is an important election, as it offers a golden opportunity to keep moving forward, to actualize our potential as a community. We have come so far in the last 8 years. I don't believe in being stagnant, to be simply satisfied for what is. And I don't believe in going backwards. My aim is always in the future. I served on the city council, and I served in the Maine legislature. I have been part of numerous committees and commissions. I have the experience to navigate the pathways of government. The record of my administration over the last 8 years is visible. It is proven. I have not just talked about things that I wanted to do, I've done them. If you like the current direction of the city with its improvements, if you feel proud to belong to this community, if you believe that we have yet to achieve our full potential, please consider voting for me for another term. There are no special interests in my administration. I don't have friends in the mills. That's just demagoguery. That's just made up stuff. Anybody who's come into my office realizes pretty quickly that they're on equal footing with anybody, you know? I grew up in a cold water flat, folks. You know, the type where you had to boil water to take a bath. You know, that's how far back I go, and all my friends were the same. I grew up on Graham Street, graduated from Biddeford High, went to Orono, came back to teach for 35 years. I swore I was only going to teach for 5, but I had such great kids. Why? Because they were such hard workers. There was something essential about them in terms of what they wanted to be and what they could become. I taught and coached over 2,000 kids. Some of them are out here right now. They're not kids anymore. In my capacity as a teacher and elected official, I've always done my best to reflect the values of what I learned from my parents and my teachers. Living and working in Biddeford all those years, I saw the good times and I saw the bad. I remember the bustling and crowded main streets from when I was a kid in the 60s. I saw my first color TV at Warren's Furniture Store, and I was like in awe of all that. Then I saw the collapse of Main Street in the 80s as the mill machinery slowed and mall shopping became the norm. I remember a banner that once hung across Main Street, must have been in the 80s, that read, "Look up Biddeford." It was a campaign of trying to recreate community pride. And as I was walking down Main Street that day, there was this old guy that had this checkered hat. He was a gambler by reputation. I don't know if that was really true, but that's what I knew him as. And he stopped and looked at me and scoffed and said, "It should read, Biddeford, the city that refused to live." And sometimes I think we're condemned by that. I sometimes think that we're condemned by not being able to actualize what we are because maybe we're not good enough, that maybe we can't do that. That's not about me. I want to reach out there, whether it's building garages or taking over Merck or whatever it happens to be. I believe that we can be better. That is all behind us. All that stuff's behind us. We are alive today in this city. We're not the stereotypical old mill town, even though some of us keep defining us by that. We have exceeded all expectations and predictions. There was a study done just a few years ago that said we were going to continue growing old. Wrong there. That the downtown would decay. Wrong there. That our schools would decline. Wrong there. They were wrong on everything. And even Senator King and Senator Collins just the other day was talking about how Biddeford has thrived, and they wanted to know what was going on here. There's a new vibrancy, a new enthusiasm. People brag about being from Biddeford today. You know, in the old days on Facebook, where do you live? In the Portland area. Not anymore, Biddeford. And they say that with pride. They brag about the restaurants, they brag about the shops, they brag about the beaches and the Riverwalk, they brag about UNE, they brag about City Theater, they brag about our parks and our schools. I don't want to lose that feeling, but I want more. This election is simply not about parking in parking garages. It's not a one-trick pony show. It's about vision, it's about economics, it's about community, it's about quality of life. It's about the bigger picture, not a small, out-of-silver context sliver of what is happening. It's about Winterfest and River Jam. It's about Fringe Fest and Kermesse. It's about our ethnic heritage and diversity. It's about friends and families. Main Street and Clifford Park is about young and old. We have it all right under our noses, and I believe with all of my heart that if I can continue with your help, I can make this future happen. Many people try to close Maine Energy. My administration did it. Many people tried to initiate recycling in the city. My administration did it. Many people wanted to revitalize Main Street. My administration did it. Many people wanted to see the river dredge. My administration did it. Now, that's not to say I did it by myself, because I know they'll be taken out of context. I have had the opportunity of working with great councils. Some of them councils are out there. And I've worked with a great staff. But it's about pulling it all together. That's what leadership is about. Setting the tone, setting the expectations, setting the goals. And people buy into that. I fostered the belief and the enthusiasm that we can do anything if we only try and get over the obstacles that hold us back, that we're not good enough or whatever. I love this city. You know, I am Biddeford proud. I believe that all of you also love this community. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be here. Please share your enthusiasm and energy with me in moving this city forward with creativity and sensibility. And I thank you for your support.
Well, a big thank you to both candidates. Really appreciate you being here tonight and sharing what you believe, and thank you to the audience for coming as well. And remember to vote on November 5th. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dana.